All right, so the beginning of chapter 11 is talking about square roots. So we're just going to do a quick overview, and then I'm going to break up this one section, 11.1, into 4 or 5 parts. So just kind of understanding what square roots are of a number is basically it's the root number of something that is being squared. That's how it gets to square roots. As you get further along in math, you can have cubic roots, fourth roots, but right now it's everything that is squared, as in the root of a number that's being squared. So in this example, we have 3 squared equals 9. So the square root of a number that is 9, meaning a number that can be squared that could equal 9, would be 3. So basically the base. So 3 is the square root of 9. If we asked, hey, what is 4 squared? So 4 times 4 equals 16. So the square root of 16 is 4. All right, so now how we represent what a square root is from this symbol. It's called a radical symbol. So you just kind of go up like that. And whenever's underneath, you're basically asking what is the square root of that number. So on your calculator, there's this calculator I found online. This is your square root symbol. This would be if it wasn't a square root, if it was a cubic root or something other than that. But for right now, we're just going to be looking at square roots. So going back to this page, we can say, hey, what is the square root of these following numbers? So the square root of 64 is 8. So when we do that on a calculator, you can just type in this, square root 64, and it comes out as 8. On this calculator, I don't have to put enter or anything, but yours at home, you probably have to hit enter after you do that. When we get further into this chapter and we talk about simplifying square roots, it's always good to just check to see if the square root is a perfect square root, and you just type that in your number. If it comes out as a whole number, then it is. All right, so if there is a negative outside the square root, you just do the same thing. Square root of 64 would be 8, and then just make sure the negative is in there. Square root of 0 is just going to be 0, because 0 squared is 4. And then if you see this symbol, sometimes it means positive or negative, the square root of 64. And again, the square root of 64, that would be positive or negative 8 as our answer. So now this is kind of a note that may or may not come up in the next few days, but you cannot take the square root of a negative number. So meaning if a number is negative inside the radical, there is no solution, because there's no two numbers that are the same when you multiply them together that will equal a positive number. So anytime you see the radicand, they call it the radicand, the part inside. So if I have the square root of 16, that equals 4, because we know that 4 times 4 equals 16. But if I have the square root of negative 16 or negative whatever perfect square number, no solution. It's all you need to know for right now. So as we get into simplifying these, if you have to do a bunch of work inside the radical, because this is basically a grouping symbol, so you would simplify everything underneath before you do longer problems, and it comes out to be negative, you would know that there's no solution. There is a technique when we get into graphing called imaginary numbers, but we are not going to cover that this year or next year, so we don't have to worry about it for right now. So go ahead and for this checkpoint right here, again, this section is really straightforward. You're just looking for the answers of these. So pause the video here and type these into your calculator and get the answer. So when we have the square root of 100, you just type that into your calculator. So the square root button, or you would put 100 and then square root. So in this case, it's 10. So this would be, because there's a plus and minus out front, plus or minus square root, plus or minus just 10. All right, so there's a negative out front here, so we know our answer is going to be negative. So what is the square root of 25? Meaning what two same numbers multiplied together equal 25. So to do that, just do square root 25, and we see that we get 5 for our answer. So this would be negative 5. So you might already be able to do these in your head. What two of the same numbers would multiply to equal 36? Type it in your calculator, but if you don't know, it would be 6 and we've already done 16 a bunch of times. That would be 4. So these are called perfect squares when you can take the square root of a number and it comes out as a whole number. And again, we're going to get used to using that square root button on our calculator, if anything, just to check to see if it's a perfect square first, and then if not, how we simplify the radical based on what we're going to do in the next section.